In the shadowy world of international espionage, some spies wear disguises and carry briefcases full of classified documents. Others simply need a laptop and an internet connection. This is the story of Su Bin, a Chinese businessman who orchestrated one of the most damaging cyber espionage operations in modern history, stealing the secrets behind America's most advanced military aircraft and handing them directly to Beijing. When FBI agents arrested Su Bin in June 2014 at Vancouver International Airport, they uncovered something that sent shockwaves through the Pentagon and defense contractors across America. On his computers and in his communications, they found evidence of hundreds of thousands of stolen files from Boeing and Lockheed Martin. These weren't just any files. They contained radar signatures, design specifications, and engineering blueprints for the F-22 Raptor, the F-35 Lightning II, and the C-17 military transport aircraft. The most advanced aerospace technology America had ever developed, now in the hands of the Chinese government. But who was Su Bin? How did a middle-aged aviation enthusiast manage to pull off one of the most sophisticated thefts of military technology in history? And what were the consequences of his actions? This is that story. To understand Su Bin's espionage operation, we first need to understand the man himself. Born in China in the 1960s, Su Bin grew up during a transformative period in Chinese history. He pursued education in aviation technology and eventually established himself as a businessman operating between China and Canada. On the surface, he appeared to be exactly what he claimed, an entrepreneur running a small aviation technology company called Load Technology. Su Bin wasn't a hacker in the traditional sense. He didn't have elite programming skills or a background in computer science. What he had was something potentially more dangerous: knowledge of the aviation industry, business connections that spanned the Pacific, and an understanding of what information would be most valuable to Chinese military intelligence. By the early 2000s, Su Bin had positioned himself perfectly. He lived in Canada, had business ties in the United States, and maintained strong connections back in China. He understood aircraft systems, knew the defense contractors, and recognized the immense value of the technology being developed by American companies. More importantly, he knew that China desperately wanted this technology. China's military modernization was accelerating rapidly. The People's Liberation Army Air Force was investing billions in developing fifth-generation stealth fighters that could rival American air superiority. But there was a problem. Despite massive investments, Chinese engineers were years, perhaps decades, behind their American counterparts in critical technologies like stealth coding, advanced avionics, and radar-evading airframe design. Su Bin saw an opportunity. He could become the bridge between American innovation and Chinese ambition. Around 2008, Su Bin connected with two hackers based in China. These weren't random cybercriminals. They were sophisticated operators with access to advanced, persistent threat capabilities, the kind of resources typically available only to state-sponsored groups. Together, they formed an unlikely team. Su Bin would identify the targets and specify exactly what information was needed, while his partners in China would do the actual hacking. The operation was methodical and patient. This wasn't a smash-and-grab job. Su Bin and his co-conspirators spent years carefully infiltrating the computer networks of America's premier defense contractors. They moved slowly, avoiding detection, extracting massive amounts of data bit by bit. The scale of what Su Bin and his team accomplished is staggering. Between 2009 and 2013, they successfully breached the networks of Boeing and Lockheed Martin repeatedly, extracting an estimated 630,000 files. To put that in perspective, we're talking about gigabytes of highly classified technical data representing decades of American aerospace research and billions of dollars in development costs. What exactly were they stealing? The crown jewels of American military aviation. The F-35 Lightning II, also known as the Joint Strike Fighter, was the most expensive weapon system ever developed. Multiple countries had invested in its development, and it represented the future of air combat for the United States and its allies. The stolen files included detailed information about the aircraft's radar systems, the design of its frame, its stealth capabilities, and numerous other technical specifications. The F-22 Raptor, America's air superiority fighter, was considered so advanced that Congress had banned its export to even close allies. Yet Su Bin's operation managed to extract detailed technical data about this aircraft as well. They also targeted the C-17 Globemaster III, the massive military transport aircraft that forms the backbone of American airlift capability. While less glamorous than stealth fighters, the C-17's advanced design represented years of engineering excellence in creating an aircraft that could land on short, unprepared runways while carrying enormous payloads. How did they do it? Su Bin's operation exploited a vulnerability that plagues even the most security-conscious organizations: the human element. Through sophisticated spear-phishing campaigns and social engineering, they gained initial access to contractor networks. Once inside, they installed malware that gave them persistent access, allowing them to return again and again to extract data. But the technical hacking was only half the operation. Su Bin's role was to make sense of the stolen data. He would review the files, identify the most valuable information, and translate technical requirements between his Chinese handlers and his hacker partners. He understood what the People's Liberation Army needed to accelerate their own fighter development programs. In their communications, which investigators later recovered, Su Bin and his co-conspirators were remarkably candid about their activities. In one email, Su Bin wrote about how they were conducting destructive actions against the United States and how their work would have a great effect. In another exchange, they discussed how the stolen F-35 data could allow China to rapidly catch up with American stealth technology. The operation generated massive amounts of data. Su Bin and his team had to organize, categorize, and analyze hundreds of thousands of files. They created detailed spreadsheets tracking what they had stolen, what they still needed, and which files had been delivered to their Chinese government contacts. And delivery was systematic. Su Bin didn't just hand over raw data. He provided analysis, highlighting the most critical information and explaining its significance. He was, in effect, providing a roadmap for Chinese engineers to replicate American technological breakthroughs. Before we continue with how Su Bin's operation finally came crashing down, if you're finding this story as fascinating as we do, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. We dive deep into real stories of espionage, cyber warfare, and international intrigue that you won't find anywhere else. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so you're the first to know when we release similar content. There are so many incredible true stories out there, and we're committed to bringing them to you with the depth and detail they deserve. Now, let's get back to Su Bin's story and discover how investigators finally caught up with him. By 2013, American intelligence and law enforcement agencies knew they had a serious problem. The cybersecurity teams at Boeing and Lockheed Martin had detected the intrusions, and the FBI's cyber division had been investigating the breaches. But identifying the perpetrators behind sophisticated state-sponsored cyber operations is notoriously difficult. Hackers can route their attacks through multiple countries, use stolen infrastructure, and employ advanced techniques to obscure their identities. Attribution, the process of definitively identifying who's behind a cyber attack, is one of the hardest challenges in modern law enforcement. But Su Bin had made mistakes. Despite using encrypted communications and taking precautions, Su Bin left digital breadcrumbs. His emails, even when he thought they were secure, revealed details about his operation. His financial transactions showed payments that correlated with the timing of major data thefts, and his travel records placed him in locations that aligned with key meetings and handoffs. The FBI built its case methodically. They traced the flow of stolen data, mapped the network of conspirators, and documented the pattern of intrusions. They identified Su Bin's two main co-conspirators in China, though these individuals remained beyond the reach of American law enforcement. Su Bin, however, was vulnerable. He traveled regularly, and he had a Canadian visa. On June 28, 2014, as Su Bin arrived at Vancouver International Airport, Canadian authorities arrested him at the request of the United States government. The Americans immediately began extradition proceedings. The arrest sent shockwaves through the cybersecurity and intelligence communities. Here was tangible proof of what many had suspected. China was conducting systematic cyber espionage operations against American defense contractors, and they were stealing some of the most sensitive military technology in existence. For Su Bin, the arrest marked the beginning of a long legal battle. He initially fought extradition, claiming that he was a businessman being persecuted for his Chinese heritage. His lawyers argued that the evidence against him was circumstantial and that the charges were politically motivated. But as the case progressed, the evidence proved overwhelming. The FBI had recovered his communications with his co-conspirators. They had his own words describing the operation. They had traced the stolen files to computers he controlled. They had financial records showing payments from Chinese entities. And perhaps most damning, they had his analysis documents, where he had highlighted the most valuable stolen information for his Chinese handlers. Su Bin remained in custody in Canada while the legal proceedings dragged on. The extradition process took time, but American prosecutors were confident. They had built an airtight case. In February 2016, nearly 2 years after his arrest, Su Bin made a crucial decision. Rather than continue fighting extradition and face trial in the United States, he agreed to be transferred to American custody. In March 2016, he pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit economic espionage. The plea agreement revealed the full scope of his operation. Su Bin admitted to conspiring with 2 hackers in China to steal sensitive military information. He acknowledged that he knew the information would be used by the Chinese government, and he confirmed that the operation had successfully stolen hundreds of thousands of files containing classified technical data. In July 2016, a federal judge sentenced Su Bin to 46 months in prison. To many observers, this seemed like a light sentence given the magnitude of his crimes. The stolen technology represented billions of dollars in research and development. The damage to American military advantage was potentially incalculable. Yet Su Bin would serve less than 4 years. Why such a relatively light sentence? Several factors played into it. First, Su Bin had cooperated with investigators, providing information about his operation and his co-conspirators. Second, he had already spent significant time in custody during the extradition proceedings. Third, the judge noted that while Su Bin was a critical facilitator, he wasn't the primary hacker, and his 2 main co-conspirators in China remained out of reach. But the case's real significance went far beyond Su Bin's personal fate. His prosecution represented a watershed moment in how America addressed Chinese cyber espionage. For years, the United States government had known about systematic Chinese theft of intellectual property and military secrets. But prosecuting these cases was difficult. The hackers operated from China, beyond the reach of American law enforcement. Chinese government officials enjoyed diplomatic immunity, and proving the direct connection between individual hackers and the Chinese state was legally challenging. Su Bin's case provided a blueprint. By targeting the facilitators, the organizers, the people who traveled internationally and made themselves vulnerable to arrest, American law enforcement could strike back at these espionage operations even when they couldn't reach the hackers themselves. The Department of Justice made the strategic decision to publicize Su Bin's case extensively. They wanted to send a message. Cyber espionage had consequences, and America would pursue these cases aggressively. The impact of Su Bin's espionage operation continues to reverberate today. Within a few years of his theft of F-35 data, China unveiled its own fifth-generation stealth fighters, the J-20 and the J-31. While Chinese officials insisted these aircraft were entirely indigenous designs, aerospace experts noted striking similarities to American stealth fighters. The J-31 in particular raised eyebrows. Its design bore a remarkable resemblance to the F-35, from its general airframe configuration to specific design features. Was this convergent engineering the natural result of solving similar problems? Or was it evidence that China had successfully reverse-engineered American technology using stolen data? The truth likely lies somewhere in between. Modern fighter aircraft are incredibly complex systems. Simply having blueprints doesn't automatically allow you to replicate advanced technology. Manufacturing processes, material science, and systems integration all present their own challenges. China couldn't just photocopy the F-35, but stolen data could dramatically accelerate development. Instead of spending years exploring dead ends and testing failed designs, Chinese engineers could see which approaches worked. They could avoid the expensive mistakes that American engineers had already made and learned from. They could focus their resources on replicating successful solutions rather than discovering them from scratch. Defense analysts estimate that Su Bin's operation may have saved China a decade of development time and billions of dollars in research costs. More concerning, it may have compromised specific capabilities of American aircraft. If Chinese forces know the exact radar signature of an F-35 or understand the limitations of its stealth coatings, they can develop countermeasures. The Su Bin case also exposed deeper vulnerabilities in how America protects its most sensitive technology. Despite massive investments in cybersecurity, defense contractors had failed to prevent a years-long infiltration. The incident sparked a comprehensive review of security practices across the defense industrial base. New protocols were implemented. Network segmentation was improved to prevent hackers from moving laterally once they gained initial access. Monitoring was enhanced to detect suspicious data exfiltration. And perhaps most importantly, security awareness training was expanded to address the human vulnerabilities that hackers so often exploit. But the case also highlighted a harsh reality. In the modern era, geographical distance provides no protection. Chinese intelligence operatives could steal American military secrets without ever setting foot in the United States. The traditional spy game of dead drops and hidden microfilm had been replaced by packets of data flowing across the internet. Su Bin was released from federal custody in 2018, having served his sentence. He was immediately deported to China. What happened to him after his return remains unclear. Some analysts speculate that, despite his conviction, he was welcomed as a hero by Chinese intelligence services. Others suggest he may have faced consequences for his arrest and cooperation with American investigators. His two main co-conspirators in China were never arrested or prosecuted. They remain beyond the reach of American law enforcement, and Chinese authorities have never acknowledged their existence or role in the espionage operation. The story of Su Bin is a cautionary tale for the digital age. It demonstrates how a small group of determined individuals, armed with technical skills and valuable knowledge, can inflict strategic damage on even the most powerful nation on Earth. It reveals the new battleground of great power competition. While traditional military might remain important, the theft of intellectual property and technological secrets has become a critical arena of conflict. China's strategy of military modernization has relied heavily on acquiring Western technology, either through legitimate means or, as in Su Bin's case, through espionage. The case also raises uncomfortable questions about deterrence. Su Bin was caught and prosecuted, but the operation he facilitated was largely successful. China obtained the data it wanted. Its fighter programs benefited from stolen American technology, and the two primary hackers were never held accountable. From Beijing's perspective, the operation may have been worth the risk. For the United States, the Su Bin case represented both a wake-up call and a limited victory. American law enforcement proved it could identify and prosecute those involved in state-sponsored cyber espionage, but the case also revealed the scale of the challenge. Su Bin was one facilitator in one operation. Intelligence assessments suggest that Chinese cyber espionage targeting American defense technology is vast, ongoing, and coordinated at the highest levels. The technological secrets that Su Bin helped steal can never be uncompromised. The data is out there, integrated into Chinese fighter programs and military planning. The billions of dollars and decades of American research that went into developing the F-35's stealth capabilities have been partially, if not substantially, negated. But perhaps the most important lesson from Su Bin's story is this. In the 21st century, national security isn't just about border walls and military forces. It's about protecting the networks, the data, and the technological innovations that underpin military advantage. It's about recognizing that the next major conflict may be won or lost, not on a battlefield, but in the quiet infiltration of computer systems and the systematic theft of information. Su Bin's operation succeeded because multiple systems failed. Technical security measures, human vigilance, and counterintelligence capabilities. Fixing these failures requires sustained attention and resources. It requires treating cyber defense not as an IT problem, but as a fundamental national security imperative. Today, the invisible war continues. Chinese intelligence services, along with those of other nations, continue to probe American networks, seeking the next technological advantage. And somewhere, there may be another Su Bin, quietly organizing the theft of the innovations that will define the next generation of military power. The question is, will we catch them before the damage is done?